The real reason Julius Caesar had to die.
March 15th, 44 BC. The most powerful man in the world walks into what he believes is just another Senate meeting. 23 stab wounds later, Julius Caesar lies bleeding on the Senate floor. But here's what they don't teach you in history class. This wasn't about saving the Republic. This wasn't about honor or Roman values. This was about something far more sinister. Something that would make the conspirators themselves seem like amateurs compared to the true puppet masters pulling the strings. Welcome back to Hidden Chapters, where we expose the buried truths that shaped our world. I'm your host, and today we're diving into one of history's most famous assassinations, but not the version you think you know. For centuries, we've been told that Brutus and his fellow senators killed Caesar to save Roman democracy. Noble Romans striking down a tyrant. Heroes of the Republic. But what if I told you that's not just wrong? It's a carefully constructed lie, designed to hide the real reason Caesar had to die. What if the true conspiracy goes deeper than anyone imagined, involving forces that would make even Caesar himself seem like a pawn in a much larger game?
Today, we're uncovering the hidden chapter that reveals who really wanted Caesar dead, and why the truth was too dangerous to ever speak aloud.
Chapter 1. The Money Trail. To understand who really killed Caesar, you have to follow the money. And the money trail leads to the most powerful force in Rome, one that operated in shadows and rarely left its name in history books. Rome's wealthy merchant families and banking dynasties. These weren't just rich people. They were the economic engine of the entire Mediterranean world. And Caesar was about to destroy them. See, Caesar had a radical plan that history glosses over. He wasn't just conquering territories. He was preparing to completely restructure Roman society. Debt forgiveness for the masses, land redistribution, economic reforms that would shift power from the ultra-wealthy to the common people.
We must act before it's too late for Rome.
Indeed, the tyrant must fall. But how?
We're talking about trillions of sestertii in today's money. Caesar's reforms would have wiped out the fortunes of Rome's elite overnight. These people didn't just have money to lose. They had entire economic empires built on the exploitation Caesar was planning to end. But here's what's truly chilling. These weren't people who got their hands dirty. They had senators, generals, and politicians in their pockets. They could orchestrate Caesar's death without ever wielding a knife themselves. The conspiracy wasn't born in the Senate. It was born in the counting houses and private villas of Rome's financial elite. Brutus and his fellow conspirators, they were just the expendable frontmen. Chapter 2. The Egyptian Connection. But the financial conspiracy goes even deeper when you consider Caesar's relationship with Cleopatra. This wasn't just a love affair. It was an economic alliance that threatened to reshape the entire ancient world. Egypt controlled Rome's grain supply. Literally, the bread that kept Roman citizens from rioting came from Egyptian farms controlled by Cleopatra. And Caesar was planning to formalize an alliance that would have given him, and through him, the Roman people, direct access to that wealth. Imagine what this meant for the Roman merchants who had made fortunes by controlling and inflating grain prices. Caesar's Egyptian alliance would have cut them out entirely, giving cheap grain directly to the people. But here's the part that will make your blood run cold. Cleopatra was pregnant with Caesar's child, a male heir who would have legitimate claims to both Roman and Egyptian power. The Roman elite realized that if this child lived and inherited both thrones, Rome would become just one part of a Mediterranean super-empire, controlled by a hybrid Roman-Egyptian dynasty. Their carefully constructed power structure would be obliterated. So the conspiracy wasn't just about killing Caesar. It was about preventing the birth of an empire that would have made Rome's traditional elite irrelevant. They weren't just murdering a dictator. They were committing infanticide by proxy, ensuring that Caesarion would never claim his inheritance. And history proves they succeeded. After Caesar's death, Cleopatra fled to Egypt with their son. Years later, when Octavian finally conquered Egypt, one of his first acts was to have Caesarion murdered.
the conspiracy's final loose end, tied up with a child's blood.
Chapter 3. The Veteran Problem. But there's another angle to this conspiracy that's even more disturbing. Caesar's veterans. These weren't just soldiers. They were a private army of men who had sworn personal loyalty to Caesar, not to Rome. Caesar had settled over 400,000 veterans in colonies throughout the Mediterranean. Each one owed their land, their livelihood, and their future to Caesar personally. In essence, Caesar had created a network of military settlements that answered to him alone. Look at where these colonies were placed. They formed a strategic network that could control trade routes, supply lines, and communication across the entire Roman world. Caesar hadn't just been conquering territories. He'd been building a shadow empire, run by men who would die for him. The traditional Roman elite suddenly realized what Caesar had done. He'd created a parallel power structure that could survive even if Rome itself fell. His veterans weren't just retired soldiers. They were the foundation of a new kind of empire, one based on personal loyalty rather than republican institutions. And here's what made it terrifying. These veterans were getting older, but their sons were coming of age. A second generation raised on stories of Caesar's greatness, trained in warfare, and owing everything to the Caesar family name. The conspiracy realized they weren't just facing Caesar, they were facing the prospect of a permanent military dynasty. They could call upon hundreds of thousands of trained warriors scattered across the known world. This is why the assassination had to happen quickly, before Caesar left for his Parthian campaign. Once he left Rome with his veterans, he might never need to come back. He could rule the Mediterranean from anywhere, with an army that answered only to him. Chapter 4. The Religious Dimension. But perhaps the most sinister aspect of the anti-Caesar conspiracy involved Rome's religious establishment. Caesar hadn't just challenged political and economic power, he'd begun to position himself as a living god. The month of Julius, temples dedicated to his genius, priests appointed to his personal cult. Caesar was systematically dismantling the traditional Roman relationship between gods and mortals. For the Roman priestly class, this wasn't just political, it was spiritual warfare. Caesar was committing what they saw as the ultimate blasphemy, declaring himself equal to the gods their families had served for generations. But here's what's truly disturbing. Caesar's divine status wasn't just symbolic. It came with legal immunity. As a living god, Caesar could claim that traditional Roman law didn't apply to him. He was literally placing himself above human judgment. The religious conspiracy against Caesar was about more than preserving tradition. It was about preventing the complete collapse of Roman legal and moral authority. If Caesar succeeded in his divine transformation, Rome would become a theocracy, with him as its living god-king. This is why the religious establishment threw their weight behind the conspiracy. The famous soothsayer who warned Caesar to beware the Ides of March wasn't trying to save Caesar. He was part of a network of priests and orders working to destroy him. They used their religious authority to legitimize the assassination, claiming it was the will of the gods that Caesar must die. The conspiracy wasn't just political or economic, it was a holy war disguised as patriotism. Chapter 5. The Cover-Up. But here's where the conspiracy gets truly sophisticated. The cover-up began before Caesar's body was even cold. The assassins had prepared not just to kill Caesar, but to completely rewrite the narrative of why he had to die. Within hours of the assassination, carefully prepared propaganda was flooding Rome. Caesar the tyrant, Caesar the enemy of the Republic, Caesar the threat to Roman freedom. But notice what's missing from these stories. Any mention of the economic interests, the Egyptian threat, the veteran army, or the religious conspiracy. Instead, we get noble Brutus and his fellow patriots saving Roman democracy. The real conspiracy had successfully created a fake conspiracy to hide behind. They transformed a multifaceted plot involving financial, military, and religious interests into a simple story about Republican virtue. And this propaganda was so successful that it survived for over 2,000 years. Even today, Most people believe the assassins were motivated by noble ideals rather than naked self-interest and existential fear.
The conspiracy didn't just kill Caesar. They killed the truth about why Caesar had to die. They created one of history's most successful cover-ups, turning themselves from desperate conspirators into Republican heroes.
Conclusion: the pattern of power. So why did Julius Caesar really have to die? Because he threatened every power structure that kept Rome's elite in control. The financial networks that profited from poverty, the military traditions that kept power in senatorial hands, the religious systems that legitimized aristocratic rule. Caesar's assassination wasn't about saving the Republic. It was about preserving an oligarchy. And the most chilling part? The same patterns of power that killed Caesar still operate today. The real tragedy isn't that Caesar died. It's that his death prevented reforms that might have created a more just society. The debt forgiveness, land redistribution, and economic equality he planned died with him on the Senate floor. Within years of Caesar's death, Rome was back to the same old patterns. The rich got richer, the poor stayed poor, and the powerful remained powerful. The conspiracy had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. The next time you hear about the noble assassination of Julius Caesar, remember this: you're hearing the winner's version of history. The real story is about what happens when entrenched power feels truly threatened, and what lengths it will go to preserve itself. This has been Hidden Chapters, revealing the conspiracies that shaped our world. What other assassinations were really something else entirely? Subscribe to find out, and remember, in the game of power, the official story is usually the lie.